an explosion in Russia. It was loud, powerful, and bright. A scandal in Vinnytsia. Hundreds of people received warnings from the police, and some were even detained. And a new home for exotic servals. All this and more right now. Hello, friends. I'm Irina Prokofieva, and this is TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch the broadcast, and be sure to comment on what you found most interesting. We're getting started. 53 drones were launched by the Russians at Ukraine last night. Most of them were Shahids, but there were also decoy UAVs. This was reported by the Air Force. The locations where the enemy's launchers are stationed are known. These are Milarovo, Kursk, Bryansk, and Havardisk in temporarily occupied Crimea. In addition to regular Shahids, the occupiers also use new jet-powered UAVs. They can reach speeds of up to 400 kilometers per hour. However, our Air Force quickly adapts and shoots down even such difficult targets. Last night's attack was repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft missile troops, electronic warfare units, and mobile fire groups. They managed to neutralize 45 targets. However, there were hits in 5 locations, as well as debris falling in 2. In the afternoon, the enemy launched a massive strike on Drushkivka in the Donetsk region. Locals heard at least 10 explosions. It is already known that 7 people were injured. The city suffered a drone attack. The Russians hit the local market on a weekend, when it was crowded. Fires broke out at the impact sites. Market stalls were burning, 2 houses, a shop, and an administrative building were damaged. Several cars were destroyed. 11 people were injured. Among them are children aged 9 and 10, as well as a 5-month-old baby. Russian terrorists attacked Kharkiv at around 9 in the evening. They struck with Malmia drones. 1 hit near an apartment building. 2 people are in the hospital. Doctors are fighting for the life of a woman who is in critical condition. The Russians attacked one of the villages in the Zaparvye district. 3 people were hospitalized. 100 private houses, a school, and a clinic were damaged. All day long, the enemy has been shelling Kherson and Bilozerka with artillery. 2 local residents were killed. Another 4 men suffered blast injuries. Dnipro region is also rocked by explosions and fire. In Vasilivka, a local resident was injured in a drone attack. A private house caught fire. 4 more were damaged. 2 people were injured in the Mazivska community due to FPV drone strikes. In the Kiev region, they said goodbye to 6-year-old Matviko, who was killed by a Russian missile. Matvey Marchenko became one of the victims of the Russian strike on a residential building in the capital on the night of July 31st. A wall of the apartment collapsed on the boy. They managed to pull the child out alive from under the rubble, but the boy died in the ambulance from his injuries. Dozens of people came to say goodbye to 6-year-old Matviko, bringing flowers and toys. The boy was buried in his father's native village in the Kiev region. Matviko was the youngest son in the family. His parents and his 2 older brothers, 8-year-old Mikhailo and 12-year-old Lev, managed to survive. The boy practiced swimming and karate. For a year and a half, he trained at one of the capital's clubs. According to his coach, the boy was a persistent and determined athlete. Despite his young age, Matviko took his training seriously, dreamed of becoming a champion and winning medals, says his coach Ira Yefimenko.
Matviko was an obedient, well-behaved, kind child who simply dreamed of beating everyone and everything.
He dreamed of earning as many medals as possible. Matvey is a sunny child.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the Security Service of Ukraine have confirmed strikes on military targets in Russia. Yes, explosions were recorded at 2 oil refineries in the occupying country, Ryazan and Novokivishevsk. Ukrainian-friendly drones also paid a visit to a fuel and lubricants base with the romantic name, Anna Oil Product, in the Voronezh region. In total, there were fires in at least 5 regions of the terrorist country. Residents of the Ryazan, Lipetsk, Voronezh, Rostov, and Samara regions heard the sounds of war with their own ears. In Ryazan, explosions, which Russians stubbornly call pops, were heard near the Victoria Plaza shopping center. At least 2 explosions were heard in Tagan Rock on the coast of the Sea of Azov. The Electroprolad enterprise in the city of Penza also took a hit. Finally, in a different context, we also mention the infamous Primorsko-Akhtarsk in Krasnodar Krai, from where drones fly at us almost every night. The Security Service of Ukraine reports our drones struck the airfield where deadly Russian drones were stored. The fire there is visible even from space. NASA satellites can see the heat signature from the scorched remains at this airfield. It was also a tense night in temporarily occupied Crimea. There are reports of a strike on a Russian radar installation in Feodosia. And the eyewitnesses to all this action didn't hold back, using their great and mighty language to describe their excitement at what they saw.
Here's the video.
The shockwave will reach us.
Are you kidding me?
Look, damn.
There was also trouble with the Russian gas pipeline. Central Asia Center. Sources from Ukrainian media and our military intelligence say that a series of explosions occurred in the Volgograd region. Because of that, gas is no longer flowing there. It is known that this pipeline supplied energy to a number of important facilities of the aggressor country's military-industrial complex. Deploy 2 nuclear submarines. After an argument with the deputy head of Russia's Security Council, Medvedev, Donald Trump gave the order. The President of the United States emphasized 2 nuclear submarines are heading to the appropriate regions, without specifying which ones exactly. All this is happening against the backdrop of Medvedev's provocative statements. In particular, he had earlier responded to Trump's ultimatum regarding measures against Russia if it does not end the war in Ukraine within 10 days. Medvedev stated, and I quote, "Every new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war." Well, Donald Trump hopes that Medvedev's words won't lead to unpredictable consequences. The U.S. president also shared American data on Russian losses in the war against Ukraine. Just in the past month, the American leader says 20,000 Russian soldiers have been killed. Since the beginning of the year, Moscow has lost more than 112,000. In contrast, since the beginning of the year, Ukraine has lost 8,000 soldiers. And this number, according to Trump, does not include those missing in action, the U.S. president noted. And now about the losses among Ukrainian civilians during Russian strikes on our cities. And now, let's turn to the situation on the battlefield. According to the General Staff, there were more than 170 engagements in the past day. The occupiers are pushing most intensely towards Pokrovsk. Our soldiers repelled 66 attacks in this direction. It was particularly intense near Novoeconomic, Promin, and Zeleny. Overall, the enemy offensive in Donetsk region is only intensifying. Deep state analysts report that Russian advance units have made gains in Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, Zeleny, near Oleksivka and Andrivka, and Klebsov. The enemy is also breaking through in the Lyman direction. About 20 attacks have been stopped here. Fighting took place near Karpivka, Torsky, and Ibrova. Meanwhile, our forces are responding in Zaporizhia. The missile forces and artillery of the armed forces of Ukraine struck 7 areas where enemy personnel, weapons, and military equipment were concentrated, as well as 2 enemy artillery systems. In just one day, they took out over 1,000 Russian soldiers, destroyed 38 artillery systems, and 130 enemy armored vehicles. The situation has escalated south of Zaporizhia, particularly in the area around Kamiansk. Every day, the Russians launch assaults there, trying to push Ukraine's defense forces back towards Stepnohursk. Among those holding back enemy attacks in this sector are the soldiers of the 128th Separate Transcarpathian Mountain Assault Brigade. The TSN film crew also made it to the position of the self-propelled artillery crew during their night shift. The QR code you see on your screens during the report is for raising funds for drones for the 128th Brigade's Unmanned Systems Battalion. They need a lot of them to effectively destroy the enemy. So let's donate.
They're launching rockets. Is that a red rocket? Yes.
Red rockets flare up every night over the line of contact between Kamiansk and Nestoryanka, south of Zaporizhia.
It comes in waves. Sometimes it gets more intense. Sometimes they come at us, sometimes, well, into our area of responsibility. Sometimes they go after our neighbors.
Before massive assaults, the artillerymen of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade say the Russians usually don't start with signal rockets.
It depends, sometimes with artillery preparation, sometimes not.
And almost every time, enemy attacks are preceded by powerful remote airstrikes with guided aerial bombs.
It was like this before, and it still is now. Basically, nothing much has changed. It's just the range. They sometimes hit from farther away, sometimes closer.
Just a few minutes had passed when Alish, together with Stryamny and Bodier, the entire crew of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade's 2 S-1 self-propelled howitzer, left their vehicle. They waited inside, ready for action in case of a Russian attack. And it wasn't the first time just that night.
Well, this is the second time. The second time tonight. Sometimes it's more, sometimes less. Depends on the night.
Their 122mm self-propelled gun now looks more like a stationary howitzer, admits the Gvozdika's driver mechanic.
We're just sitting in one spot, basically like a regular gun.
He was taught, Stryamny says, to do everything so that the Zakarpattia artillery vehicle could get to its firing position as quickly as possible on its own, and just as quickly leave it. But maneuvering through the Zaporizhzhia steppes, the driver admits, is now an unaffordable luxury.
A lot of things are flying around. Shells? Well, FPVs and such, so we don't get burned, because that way it's safer and we can keep firing from our positions longer.
To fire, says the commander of the 128th self-propelled gun crew. Most often now we have to fire at enemy infantry advancing to the north, or at the fire support positions covering the occupiers' infantry.
Ours is considered small, so it fires at infantry, mortars, various combat assets, supply vehicles coming up, and lightly armored vehicles. Ready to record. Begin. 532 as usual. Repeat. Well, for me it's loaded and ready. Fire. Shot.
It looks like just an entrance to a dugout, but in reality, it's a camouflaged Ukrainian self-propelled artillery unit. In fact, this is exactly what every howitzer near the front line looks like now, on the southern section of the front. Such thorough camouflage takes effort, the self-propelled artillery crew of the 128th admit. But the situation near the front line forces them to make that effort.
Everything is covered with nets. Everything is camouflaged as much as possible.
Is this just a precaution, or is it really that necessary here right now?
It's a necessity. That's actually how we survive.
And also thanks to the machine guns of our air defense comrades. Do you have to use it often? When something's flying. That weapon isn't of a very large caliber and doesn't have the range of the Gvozdika, but it's really helpful when the crew of the mountain assault vehicle is getting ready to work inside the machine. Loaded.
538. Full. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Vazia, you ready? Yeah. Gun, let's go.
That morning, the shells from the self-propelled guns of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade were flying toward the Stepo-Sherbeki sector. Since mid-May, this is a frontline area where the Russians have been trying to attack the Ukrainian defensive line almost every day. Reporting from the southern sector of the front in Zaporizhzhia, Oleksandr Motornyai, Oleksandr Shayin, and Vitaly Ovsyannikov, TSN 1+1.
He was a compassionate friend, a good person, and above all, he dreamed of becoming a combat medic because he knew Ukraine needed him. Today, in the town of Vyshniv in the Kiev region, people said their goodbyes to 23-year-old Ivan Pismeniai. News of the death of the fourth-year student at the Bogomolets National Medical University, who was studying at the Faculty for Training Doctors for the Armed Forces of Ukraine, became known on July 27th, on Medical Workers' Day. The educational institution expressed their condolences and added that this is a tremendous loss, as they were proud to have a student like Ivan. He was the head of his year and group, and people listened to him. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, he volunteered to work as a male nurse in the infectious diseases ward because he wanted to help people. After successfully passing his exams at the beginning of this summer, Ivan decided to join the Armed Forces of Ukraine to have the opportunity to save people on the front lines. Today, many townspeople, acquaintances, and the entire university faculty gathered to pay their last respects to the hero. Ivan is survived by his parents, an older sister, and a brother.
We met in our first year, yes, when we both entered medical university together, and from that time on, we became friends. He was someone we will never forget. We will always remember him with a smile on our faces, so thank you for that.
A new home for evacuated servals. At the Kiev Zoo, they showed the housewarming of the first pair of these long-legged African cats in their summer residence. Back in 2023, zoo volunteers rescued 4 animals from then frontline Kurakov, where they were under constant shelling, and handed the servals over to the care of the Kiev Zoo. That's where TSN filmed them a few years ago. Here's some archival footage. The animals arrived from Donetsk region in terrible condition. They were exhausted and frightened. And in these shots, you can see that the cats were stressed. The servals' rehabilitation took a long time. And now, after their condition stabilized, after treatment and adaptation, Osiris and Sekhmet are already getting acquainted with their new space. The zoo staff set it up taking into account all the specific needs of the serval breed. The graceful, sweet cats now have a 3-level house, hammocks, branches, logs to climb on, and they get their favorite diet with meat.